Hey guys, what's happening? So now, with getting back into Future State, we're once again revisiting the year 2027, but in this case, with The Flash rather than Dark Detective. And I gotta say, like, with everything that I've seen so far with Future State, in comparison to the conclusion of Death Metal, like, The Flash has to be the craziest how it started and how it's going type of situation. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so you can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping in, we start off at Checkmate headquarters, which previously I thought had either been shut down or changed over into something else, but originally it just started as a group called the Agency, which was ran by Amanda Waller, who at the time had it run by the Negative Woman, but then later she then handed it over to Lieutenant Larry Stein, who then turned it into Checkmate. But the way that it's set up is kind of like S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Hellfire Club had a love child, because on one hand it's set up a lot like S.H.I.E.L.D., but then within its structure you have your kings and queens and knights and so on. But through the years a lot has changed with these guys that I haven't really kept up with, but from what I remember, they're like your top-notch spy agency, which was vaguely connected to Task Force X, and at one point they had some sleeper agents from the Cobra Cult, and I think they were even ran by Maxwell Lord at one point. Like, don't quote me on that, because my knowledge on these guys is very obscure. But when we jump in here at their base, we see what appears to be the Thinker, and he's calling all different kind of moves and giving orders, sending bishops over to Fuji, Japan, while also confirming that Task Force X is a go on Earth 3, with also mentioning that Peacemaker will take the lead once he's on site. But as soon as we see this, they're just quickly bombarded by Barry Allen and the other speedsters, who make their way in here using a mirror portal, which is clearly tech taken from Mirror Master, but then on top of that also using a number of weapons and gadgets that have been taken from like your Flash Rogues Gallery, like your weather wand and your cold gun, and like pretty much anything these guys could get their hands on to make their way in here. But even with using all these weapons, the one thing they don't have is their speed, and we'll get into why in just a little bit. But with coming here, their plan was to find the Thinker and take his thinking cap, only then to find out that this wasn't the Thinker, but instead it's the Calculator. And I tell you, man, like, these golden age names, like, some of them stand the test of time and some of them don't, and I'll leave it to y'all to decide in the comments like which ones did and didn't. But jumping in here, the Calculator, he's a lot like us. He's like, wait a minute, the speedsters don't have any speed and they're stealing villains' weapons. And for a second when he sees this, he's kind of like, why though? But even with that second of being distracted, like, it's long enough for Impulse to come through using Rainbow Raider's tech, and with doing so snatching the thinking cap off of the Calculator. And when this happens, like, it's here that we find out that the heroes are doing this to save Wally. And we get more of the details later as far as what happened to Wally, but as far as like in this moment, it's believed that the solution to saving Wally, that it's highly dependent on using the cap of the Thinker. But at this time you have Impulse, who's celebrating a bit early. He has his back turned to the Calculator, who pulls a calculator out of his shirt pocket with a laser on it, and just before he shoots, Max Mercury sees him and hits him with a weather wand, but the Calculator still gets a shot off, hitting Bart in the back, killing Impulse just before they can get out of there. And when this happens, like, Max, Jay, Avery, like, everybody takes it hard. And definitely Barry as well, because Bart wasn't just Flash family, he's like family. But even with that, Barry still focuses on the job of saving Wally, because also Bart sacrificed his life so this whole thing could work out. And even though during this time everyone is still grieving Bart, Barry still gets to working on the thinking cap because Wally's still out there and Wally can still be saved. But in the case of Barry, while mourning and working, he's trying to be strong at least for the others, because at the end of the day, somebody's got to keep hope. And for Barry, finding solutions, those bring answers, and answers bring hope, which is the only thing that's keeping him going right now. But while he's working, he's also recording all of this into his ring, and with doing so keeping a log of his work and his thoughts. But it's here within this monologue to where he goes over his thoughts of like his relationship with Wally, which has been very much like a family member, especially with the way that Wally looked up to Barry before becoming a speedster, and later how after becoming a speedster, he had very much taken Wally under his wing and showed him like the ins and outs of how to use his powers. And Barry very much compares Wally's initial transformation to himself with becoming Wally's mentor or father figure. But then it's also here while Barry's recording this log to where he expresses what he knows about the events that had happened more recently, because recently something from the Speed Force had possessed Wally, giving him this crazy hunger to where he would drain other speedsters, which in this case kind of indicates what happened to the rest of the Flash family, or at least the other Wally who got drained to death. But in the case of like Barry, Avery, Jay, and Max, in their case, from what we know, Wally has only taken their speed. And with that being the case after Wally's initial change, Barry also believes that there's a reason that Wally spared their lives. And after this, he grabs the modified cap, puts it in the bag with others, and he heads on his way. But while he's out, he runs into this protest to where these people are screaming, "Free the Flash, we know you got him locked up," with many people believing here that the authorities are doing the same thing that's happening over in Gotham City. But while Barry's out here, he gets a call from Iris, who's working on a story in Conduct, but she's calling Barry to give him a heads up on some breaking news with Wally. And really she's doing this because she's telling him just as quickly as she heard, because she knows Barry wants to save Wally, and for that reason she wants him to be informed as quickly as possible, for the sake of Barry's safety. But when Iris tells Barry that there was a run-in with Wally and the Global Guardians in North Africa, not long after it quickly dawns on Barry like, okay, I know what Wally's doing. And right after that, he then quickly heads over to Avery's house to catch up with her and the others on a plan to help Wally, but immediately after, the phone's cut off because the cell towers are shut down, which is something the police had tried to do to stop all the protesters and everyone outside yelling "Free the Flash." But even with that, I'll say, like, I'm no expert in crowd control, but I will say that I doubt cutting people's phones off are gonna calm people down. But when Barry gets over to Avery's, we hear the news announcement in the background about the murders of the Global Guardians in Conduct, which I feel like we'll be hearing more about in another series. But with Barry getting here and everyone else hearing the news about Wally taking out the Global Guardians, which is being labeled as an assassination, and now Avery, Jay, and Max, they're starting to believe that Wally may be a lost cause, with after him killing Wallace and taking their speed, and now him taking out the Global Guardians. And when Barry gets here, they kinda don't want to hear another plan from him, and mainly because of what happened to Bart. But then it's here where Barry tells them like what he was trying to tell Iris as far as him figuring out what Wally's doing. Because during this time, though Wally's been taken over by this dark entity from the Speed Force, but even with that being the case, Wally is still in there. And it's here where Barry tells the others that Wally is just doing something that he learned from Barry a long time ago. Because at the time for Wally, when he at first became a speedster, there was a moment where he was the first responder to Captain Cold. And though he wasn't experienced enough to stop him, Barry did teach him that when you're in a situation like that and you're up against someone or something that's too much, the best thing to do in that time is to buy time or stall so that backup can come and help you out. And Barry believes that Wally only took their speed and spared their lives, and aside from that, he's just avoiding them in order for them to stall for a solution to come save him. And in addition to a thinking cap which they had taken from the calculator, Barry lets them know that he had modified it while also constructing a few others very much like it. And not to mention, Barry kinda took the liberty of some design inspirations from Jay's helmet, because what's the rush? But with doing this is pretty much the plan they had from the beginning with going after the Thinker's Cap, so that with using them, they can make like a conference call through the Speed Force into Wally's mind, and with their combined will push out whatever's taken over him. But with doing this and reaching out, like little did they know how serious this situation was. Because when they reach out to Wally, who at this point is in Fuji, Japan, and he's out here taking out members of the Cobra Cult, who we had seen the calculator mention earlier over at the Checkmate headquarters in the Swiss Alps. But when they get here, they see Wally on the killing spree and they're like, "Wally, stop." But then another version of Wally that's like Wally's mind and consciousness, he shows up, so they speak to Wally while they're watching this entity use his body and destroy these dudes. And when Wally's like he can't stop, it's using him and making him do this. And Barry's like, "What is it? What is making you do this?" And in response, a voice speaks through Wally saying, "I'm the rider of the apocalypse, I am famine." And immediately Jay is like, okay, this guy's lost it. But with Wally kind of going in and out, both Barry and Max Mercury, they try to assure Wally like they're there to help, but then also figure out like what's next to do. And surely enough, Wally had been hiding his mind in the Speed Force to buy them time, but from here, like with every idea they throw at Wally as far as what to do next, it seems like none of it'll work. Because with him being there, Wally tells Max that it's gonna drain him, and when Barry asks Wally if he can get back their speed, Wally can't do that in this moment because he's too weak. But with this happening, it's a very tense situation because you never know when this thing is gonna flip back, which is exactly what happens when the entity version of Wally grabs Jay, while Barry and the others were talking to the actual Wally. And when this happens, the entity, it drains Jay completely, and it lets the rest of them know, like, I knew y'all were here. And it was just letting Wally stall so he could feed on the rest of them. But with this thing draining Jay, like, Barry tries to grab him, but because they're in Wally's mind, he goes right through it. And after that, it starts draining Barry and the others at the same time. But with doing so, it then pulls Wally's conscious form back into itself. And when this happens, Wally tries to tell them that this thing, this famine thing, doesn't just feed on the physical, that there's more. But Barry and the others, they don't hear the rest of what Wally was trying to say, because one, Wally's pulled back into the entity, but then also Barry and the others, they're yanked out. And come to find out, the others were yanked out by Iris, who had rushed back after her call with Barry because she knew they were going after Wally. But even with her pulling the others out, Jay didn't make it. And when this happens, Barry looks at Jay's body and he realizes that saving Wally may not be the answer. Or even more so, now he's willing to do anything necessary to stop Wally because this killing spree just won't stop. And it's in this moment that immediately Barry starts having all these crazy dark thoughts going through his mind of how he can use all the tools that he's collected from villains, which initially he had gathered to save Wally, but now he's coming with all sorts of crazy ideas on how to use them and either combine or repurpose them to find a way to stop Wally for good. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so we can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Like I said, this is the furthest from how it started and how it's going. But let me know your guys' thoughts either in the comments below or over on Discord, because me personally, at the end of the day, I just want Wally to be okay, because he's been through a lot. And hopefully, like fingers crossed, hopefully there's a way to get back Jay, Bart, and Wallace, because Future State just started and they all dead already. But let me know your thoughts and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.